The reaping is the first Tuesday in May. You have known that date since you were old enough to know anything. The Justice Building, the square. The same escort every year in capital clothes that belong to a different world entirely. You registered for Tesserae at 12 because the family needed the grain. And the oil and the extra slip in the bowl felt like a small price then. Less small every year since. You are 16 now. Your name is in that bowl. More times than you want to think about. You stopped counting because the number stopped helping and the dread it produced was identical either way. Some prices only make sense in the moment you're paying them. The square fills the same way it always fills, quietly, with the particular silence of people who have learned that noise draws attention, and attention is not something you want on a day like this. Level 1. The unprepared tribute. Your name is called, and for a full second, your body doesn't process it as something happening to you. It processes it as something happening to someone else in a room adjacent to the one you're standing in. Then the people around you step back and create the space you're supposed to walk through, and your legs start moving before your mind has agreed to anything. The stage is higher than it looks from the crowd. The escort smiles the smile she gives everyone. Practiced. Symmetrical. She shakes your hand and says your name into the microphone, and the square stays quiet because the square doesn't perform enthusiasm for the seam. You look out at the crowd and find the faces you know, and they are doing the specific thing faces do when the people behind them are trying very hard not to feel what they're feeling. You look away first. It's easier. The train is the nicest thing you have ever been inside. That is the detail nobody warns you about. That the capital starts working on you before you even arrive. Real food on the table. Hot water that runs as long as you want it. Sheets that smell like nothing you have a name for. You eat more in the first 4 hours than you normally eat in 2 days, and you know, somewhere beneath the full stomach and the clean clothes, that this is intentional. This is how it begins. They show you what exists on the other side of scarcity. They show you what the world looks like when resources aren't rationed by fear. Then they put you in an arena and remind you that it was never yours to keep. The comfort isn't kindness, it's a demonstration. Your mentor is a victor who stopped trying long enough ago that he has stopped pretending to still be trying. You can see it in the way he holds his glass and in the way he looks at you and then past you at the wall. He gives you 2 pieces of advice before the first night is over. Find water before you find anything else. Don't trust anyone who finds you first. Then he is done talking and his glass is full again, and the conversation ends. You take both pieces and fold them into something small enough to carry. It is more than some tributes receive, and you already understand that. The opening ceremony puts you in a costume representing your district's industry. It is not the worst costume on that stage. It is not the one the cameras linger on. You practice the wave, you practice the smile. You watch the career tributes at the other end of the procession, and you understand the specific difference between performance and announcement. They are not performing anything. They are telling you the shape of the next few weeks. You receive the information, and you file it, and you keep waving. The training center gives you 3 days to show the game makers what you have. What you have is practical. You know which plants keep you alive in the right biome. You can move quietly through dense terrain because you grew up needing to. You have endurance built from years of having no alternative. None of it translates cleanly into a 90-second demonstration for a panel of officials who are eating between evaluations and have watched 100 versions of you before. You throw a knife at a target on the last day because it seems like what's expected. You hit the outer ring. You receive a 5. You sit by the window that night, watching the capital in colors that don't exist in your district, and you think about the numbers and the train home and whether those are still pointing in the same direction. They are not. You know this now. You file that away too. Level 2, the crowd favorite. You are not the strongest tribute in the arena this year, not the fastest, not the most technically prepared. What you have is something the capital responds to before it can explain why. The cameras find you in the reaping crowd before your name is called. The escort's hand lingers a half-second longer. Your face does something in front of a lens that most faces simply don't do. You are likable in the specific way that converts into sponsorship, and sponsorship in the arena is survival in ways that have nothing to do with skill level. Your stylist understands immediately what she is working with. She doesn't dress you to represent your district's industry. She dresses you to be remembered. The capital audience notices before the chariot has completed its first turn. Your interview prep runs long because your prep team keeps stopping to react to things you say. Not because the things are exceptional, because you deliver them with a quality that reads as genuine. And genuine is the rarest thing the districts export to the capital every single year. Caesar Flickerman leans slightly toward you during the interview. Just slightly. You have watched enough reaping footage to know what that lean means. Somewhere beneath the lights and the rehearsed answers, you feel the thing you have been trying not to feel since your name was read in the square. Not hope, exactly. Something adjacent to it. Smaller. Considerably more dangerous. You don't let it reach your face. Your face belongs to the audience tonight, and the audience needs something specific from it. You give them what they need. The applause that follows your name is measurably different from the applause that followed everyone else. You hear the difference clearly. You file it and keep moving. The arena is nothing like you pictured and exactly like you feared. What you carry in is a face that 40 million people have already decided they want to see survive. What you don't carry in is a reliable way to make that happen. You find water on the first day. You find a potential ally on the second. The cameras follow you more than anyone except the careers. Gifts descend by a parachute at moments when the alternative would have been significantly worse. A night when the temperature drops hard and something wrapped in silver silk arrives instead of the cold doing what cold does. You look up at the sky and you understand the transaction you are inside. You feel grateful for the gift. You feel unsettled about the gratitude. Both responses are accurate and neither one cancels the other out. Level 3. The Career Tribute. You have been preparing for this since you were 6 years old. That is not a figure of speech. That is the documented timeline. Weapons handling at 8. Combat strategy at 10. Survival theory, alliance management, and psychological conditioning running in parallel through every year that follows. By the time you volunteer at 18, you have accumulated more structured preparation hours than most tributes will accumulate life experience. The reaping is not a lottery for you. It is a scheduled conclusion to a 12-year process. You volunteer before the escort finishes speaking. The timing is intentional. The confidence of the movement is intentional. The way you step forward is if the stage were already yours before you reached it. The district responds with the specific silence of people who have watched this happen before and understand exactly what it produces and what it costs, and have arrived at a kind of peace with both. You shake hands with the other career from your district, and you evaluate each other in the grip. Pressure, eye contact, what the face does when it knows it is being assessed. You both file your findings and say nothing. The training center is familiar. You already know most of the stations. You spend the 3 days running 2 parallel objectives, demonstrating enough skill to receive a high score, which arrives at 11, and watching the lower district tributes. Not for their technique, for their unpredictability. A tribute with no formal training and nothing to lose makes decisions that fall entirely outside the logical framework your preparation was built around. You identify which ones carry that quality. You adjust your projections. You do not underestimate the variable of desperation. The Career Alliance forms the first night. The logic is clean. More ground covered. Faster threat elimination. Stronger collective deterrence. Everyone in the Alliance understands it has an end date, and no one discusses that end date because addressing a future problem while present problems exist is inefficient. Efficiency is the only currency that matters now. You move through the first days as the clear apex of the arena. Other tributes hear you moving and make their decisions before you arrive. The mathematics of collective threat work entirely in your favor. What the Academy does not prepare you for is the stillness. The hours between events when the arena goes quiet and your body is at rest and your mind runs without direction or objective. You were built for action, for the application of practice skill to a defined problem. Stillness is not a defined problem, it is time. Sitting beside everything you know about what the next few days require, and the combination does something your preparation gave you no name for. You find the name on the 4th night when the cannon fires and you count the sound and update the remaining field and understand that what you are actually afraid of is not death. It is the precise shape of what staying alive requires you to become. Nobody at the Academy named that out loud. You arrived at it alone, in the dark, the way you arrive at the things that are most true about yourself. Level 4, the mentor's choice. You were not selected at random. No one will say that to your face, but you have understood it. Since the afternoon, your mentor sat across from you at 14 and asked a series of questions that didn't appear to add up to anything, and then stood and left without explanation. You understood it later. He conducts that assessment every year, quietly, across the district. He maintains a list that he carries privately against the year when it might matter. Your name was on it. When your name was called at the reaping, you watched his face across the crowd before you watched anything else. He was already nodding before the escort finished reading, The preparation that follows is different from what the Academy produces and different again from the 2 pieces of advice the unprepared tribute receives and tries to carry alone. Your mentor has been inside the arena. He knows the precise gap between what training produces and what surviving actually requires, and he has spent years measuring that gap from both sides. He tells you things the Capital doesn't know he is telling you. The patterns in game maker design decisions over the past 20 years. The specific failure modes in the final days that the broadcast consistently omits. The psychology of the late arena when the remaining tributes have lasted long enough to develop something that functions like genuine attachment to each other, and what those attachments cost and how to be the person who has already calculated that cost, rather than the person who discovers it in real time and absorbs it without preparation. He gives you this information the way you give away something you cannot take back, deliberately, without softening it. Your interview is a constructed object, every word placed with intention. The hours the night before are not rehearsal for charm. They are architectural. What story does this specific audience require? What version of you generates the emotional response that produces sponsorship and goodwill and the margin of survival those things create in the arena? You walk out under the lights and deliver the person your mentor designed, and the applause confirms the design is sound. And underneath the performance, the version of you that actually exists watches from a distance and takes notes and says nothing. The arena delivers everything your mentor prepared you for, and one thing he could not transfer. He named the loneliness, said it plainly, early, without softening it. You filed it as information. What he could not give you was the actual weight of carrying it. Being the only person in that space who holds what you hold, with nothing to verify it against, in conditions that have no use for any of it, except the single outcome it is all aimed at. Your mentor survived. He will tell you how, eventually, in the victor's village, pouring a drink for you the same way he pours for himself. Right now, there is only the arena and the preparation and the gap between the two, and you standing inside the gap trying to hold the shape of everything he said before it shifts. Level 5. The Capital's favorite. You are not from a poor district. You have never been from a poor district. Your family has resources. You grew up with a clear and consistent understanding that the world has levels, and your family occupied one near the top, and the Hunger Games were something that happened to people further down. That understanding was stable enough across your entire childhood that it became invisible the way stable things do. You trained at the academy not because the reaping frightened you, but because the academy was simply where people in your position trained. Social structure as much as preparation. You learned a sword. You developed precision with a weapon that suited your instincts. By 18, you are genuinely dangerous, and the games were always going to be part of your story. You simply, always, expected to be the ending of them. The Capital loved your district before you arrived, multiple victors in the last 2 decades, a mentor who won years ago and has spent every year since building the sponsor infrastructure you are now about to benefit from, a stylist who has dressed winning tributes before and knows what winning tributes need to project. You step off the train and into a system that was constructed, maintained, and refined specifically for someone at your level. That is the defining quality of your experience. Not individual talent, not fortunate circumstance. A system. You are the output of a process that began before you were born, and you are only now meeting its full shape. The arena is a problem you solve. That framing is both your most significant advantage and the thing you will spend the longest duration examining in the years after. You identify threats in order of priority. You manage the alliance with precision until it has served its purpose. You execute what the alliance always existed to make possible. You are not gratuitously cruel. You will say that in the interviews, on the Victor's Tour. In the years when the Capital sends you back as a mentor and you sit across from tributes from the districts with no academies and no sponsor networks, and you watch their faces and feel something that resists clean language. You were not cruel. You were prepared. There is a difference, you tell yourself. On most days, in most kinds of light, you almost fully believe it. Level 6. The Game Maker. You are not in the arena. You have never been in the arena. Your relationship to the games is entirely architectural. You design the terrain. You set the water sources, and more importantly, their absence. You decide which sector contracts on which day, at what rate, and what the tributes encounter when the temperature drops, or the fog arrives, or the ground opens beneath a specific coordinate without warning. You have been making these decisions for 11 years. The arena is, by now, an extension of a mode of thinking you built so gradually that you can no longer locate where it started. The tributes arrive and you review footage. You are identifying variables. Which skill sets require specific environmental responses? where the conflict lines will develop naturally and where they need encouragement, what the audience will require in the second week when the novelty of the opening days has worn off and the capital needs the narrative to sustain momentum. You are not indifferent to what you are reviewing. You are professional. There is a real difference between those two things, and you have learned to work cleanly inside it. The scoring panel produces a collective output shaped by individual assessments: technical skill, perceived threat level, projected narrative value. And a fourth category that doesn't appear on the official rubric but shapes every number produced in that room. How compelling will this tribute be to watch under terminal pressure? You don't use that language. The rubric calls it engagement coefficient. You complete the column. You advance to the next file. The arena runs for an average of 13 days. You monitor it in rotating shifts, adjusting environmental variables in real time against audience metrics and narrative requirements. If a tribute conceals themselves with too much effectiveness, the terrain shifts. If an alliance persists beyond the point the story requires, the resource geography is adjusted. The tributes believe they are navigating a wilderness. They are navigating a composition. You are the composer. The composition is continuous and responsive, and has been running long enough that the adjustments arrive as instinct now, rather than conscious decision. On the final day, you watch the last two tributes from the center console. One is from a career district. One is not. The one who is not has done something in the final 4 days that sits entirely outside your predictive modeling, and you have been logging it in the variable column since it first appeared. A quality that has no existing category in the rubric. Something the training data did not produce and did not account for. You watch the conclusion happen. You write the debrief. You flag the anomaly and mark it for the next design cycle's attention. You close the file. The arena deactivates. Cleanup teams are dispatched. The screens across the console go dark in sequence. You open the preliminary file for next year. The geography is already forming in the same part of your mind that never completely leaves this room, that hasn't left this room in 11 years, that you stopped trying to quiet after the 3rd or 4th year when it became clear that the trying wasn't working and the thinking was going to continue regardless. You make a note in the terrain field. The outline takes shape. The planning cycle continues. It always continues. That is the one thing about this work that has never required your decision. It simply does.